So, dear colleagues, as announced this morning, since we are in a very, 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 very impressive building of a very glorious institution, which, not unsurprisingly, is headed by one of our most distinguished colleagues, I had asked him to just say hi. And earlier in the day, he came to me and he said that he's a little bit sick, so he may not make it. But after all, heroically, he joins us just to say hi. So let me welcome the president of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, Anton Zeilinger, here to address us briefly.
Hi, everybody. The problem really is that I have some infection, so but my heart pulled me here. My heart told me that I have to be here to welcome, so to speak, my community. Now, just two words. First, I'm happy, as I said yesterday, that this activity takes off and that we apparently have some connection now with industry and with possible applications. As it was mentioned yesterday, by someone, I also agree with the viewpoint that there will be applications, but probably, as it is always the case in early stages of a technology, we don't know yet what it will be. And we will have surprises, I think. So to tell you about the connection of the Academy with quantum information, quantum optics, as you might know, a little bit more than 10 years ago, I think it's now 13 years, if I'm not mistaken, the Academy founded the ICOCI, Institute of Quantum Optics and Quantum Information, which has these two locations in Innsbruck and in Vienna. And it seems that it was the right time to start it, because many activities are actually also reflected in the flagship here. And just to say a few words about our academy, since I have been asked to do that. Our academy was founded in, is a young academy for a Western European country, 1847, because it was difficult to convince the Habsburgs to that an academy will be useful, namely the open-mindedness of the discussions and so on. Nevertheless, the building we are in here was built as the university by Maria Theresia, who was a famous empress, and she was despite the fact she was very Catholic, but on the other hand, she also was in spirit a child of enlightenment. So she built this building here for the university. You have to imagine that in the next room, anatomical dissections did go on, for example. Here is the festive hall. And I would like to look a little bit up here. I'm sure you must have done it already. This picture shows the 4 classical faculties of the university. As you will notice, there are 2 long ones, there are 2 short sides here. The long ones reflect the more important ones at that time, which is up here, law, the science of law, and up here is theology, Catholic theology. Behind you is medicine, and there you see an anatomical dissection going on, which was a sensation for the time. But this kind of thing was pictured in the public, you know. You see bodies, you see a leg sticking out from a bucket and this kind of thing. Okay? And back here is our field, philosophy. the investigation of causes. You see 2 telescopes up there, for example, and you can look for other symbols of other sciences. Just one little mention, and then I don't take away much of your time anymore. You just imagine, as I told you, this was the building of the university. In 1848, there were these revolutions in various places in Europe. And the first assemblies of the students in the revolution took place here. Imagine a revolution starting in such a room. In the end, it was not really successful, as you all know. And the fact was that the university was not allowed to use this building anymore, and they gave it to the academy. So what we now see in your workshop today and yesterday is also some kind of revolution. I'm sure it's a revolution in technology, and I really hope that it will be more successful than the revolution of 1848. I actually trust that it will really change our lives. So I wish you all the best. Now I really have to go home and take care of myself. I have an infection, as you probably can realize, and all the best. Ciao.
Well, I should not add anything, so I will not add anything, and I will just give the floor to Rogier. Thank you, Anton.
Yeah, there we are. Well, standing on the shoulders of basic science, let's discuss innovation. Everybody stays here, which is good. Innovation is an important topic. Now, few people have to have other obligations, which I respect, of course. Thierry Debussier announced this morning he would be willing to chair this session, but he's in this parallel universe for this other meeting, so I stand in. My name is Roger Verberg from TNO, and in the Q-Flag CSA, I will anyway take over this topic from Thierry, so no problem. People are still settling. So Thierry announced this morning we have new members, so we have a nice community now for this innovation working group, for which we organize regular telcos or meetings to collect the data. But most important, and that is also the reason for this meeting today, we need input from all of you. And for practical reasons, we're not all in this same phone call, so that we have from time to time this, let's say, open innovation to you to bring your input. And with the innovation work group, we discuss and probably take the actions that you all suggest. Anke Lohman, you're willing to take the notes, which is extremely important. So we have only a limited amount of time. So today is about collecting information, collecting your questions, and probably we will not have time for a debate or whatever. But the innovation working group promises you that we'll take action and respond. We have, if we can have the next, oh, I have this thing here, of course. These are the slides that Thierry showed this morning, so the 5 tasks of this innovation working group. These are the members, so if you know any one of those, simply address them with your input or send a message to either one of us. Please feel free. Let's now start with the first task, which is called 2.2.1. Anke will kick off this topic.
So, I just want to say, I'm Anke Lohman, I'm from the UK. I set up a special interest group in quantum technology right at the beginning of the quantum program. And the reason why I say this is because my task was to bring industry in the UK into the program. And what I also found is industry needed markets. So this is exactly what this innovation group is about. And in the first part, task 2.2.1 is about engaging with association, with trade associations or other bodies, which can help us to raise awareness about what takes place in quantum technology And it helps us also to get access to potential supply chains and to find markets. So what I want from you, and I listened into some of the discussions earlier on today, is in order to know what trade associations or associations we should address, I would like to have your input. Of course we have ideas already, of course we have a list, but it's always much better to get it from a much broader audience than just between us. So one thing I would like to ask you now is, if you could come up with the sectors and name of the organizations, also maybe the country and the region they cover, that would be really great. And, well, I'd be happy if you just, I mean, if any of these things, you don't have to give all of it complete, but any input would be great. We have about 10 minutes for this, and then we move on to the next one. So one of the areas I know very well is photonics. I know a lot of organizations in photonics, but which other areas do you think we should be covering, and which are those organizations we should address? Does anybody have some suggestions? Let's say, in photonics, we talked about Photonics 21. I know there are people here. We also talked about EPIC. Let's say in electronics, in software, in, I don't know, cryogenics, materials. Which organizations should we contact and talk to them about quantum technologies, try to get them involved so we reach to the community? And I'm also talking about markets, but I think markets, that's even broader. But anybody you think we should be engaging with, could you please give some ideas? Okay, you? No, you go ahead.
On the microphone, it's on. I think you mentioned already photonics, but you just keep browsing the technology platforms. You will find also the EPOS maybe relevant, but also the HPC platforms that are setting up. So there's Euro HPC setting up. There's also the technology platform linked behind, but also maybe also the Networld 2020. So it's all these behind 5G. So there's a 5G is a PPP, but there's also ETP, which is called Networld 2020, and I think they will also have the links to the right organizations behind them, so this might be a help.
Okay.
And, okay, yeah.
Thank you, good contribution. More suggestions in other areas maybe?
I think there was somebody over there, did you? No? Yes?
In the back.
So I think the photonics community is kind of on board, or in electronics is also happening, but needs a push. But maybe the largest limiting factor would be cryogenics, for miniaturized cryogenic platforms, which is sort of happening, but in much larger and much more expensive systems. And there's a limit.
Do you know anybody? Any more ideas? Come on, at the back there.
Phil Marsden, Unitive Design. I want to labour a point that I made earlier, and the organisations you're talking about are industry organisations, not end-user organisations. So my interest is medical imaging, but of course there's biophotonics, there's a whole wealth of biomedical applications, and then take it to the space applications, the automotive, the food science. All of these are the ultimate end users that you're targeting. I can name a bunch of organisations in the UK, the organisations like the, but I'm not going to name those. Organisations like the European Physical Society will have special interest groups, and then outside of that, engineering organisations will also have such groups to engage with.
Yeah. By the way, if anybody, I'm quite happy if people can email me as well, or if they want to have conversations, I'm happy to follow this up. So if you find me afterwards and give me your card or something, we can follow this. Okay. That was very good, thank you.
You want to have a contribution or not? No. Yeah?
No.
Can you repeat the name of those organizations?
From the person who just spoke, you mean? Can you give the names of the organizations you mentioned? You mentioned, certain organizations, you mentioned subjects. I think that was, sorry, the last person in there, yeah. I think, can you also think about organizations in the area of materials, for example?
Is that question for me as well?
No, no, but if you know the answer, yes. In general, I thought I'd throw it in the room to get some feedback.
Yeah, so if we take the UK, for example, there is the Institute of Physics Special Interest Group in Medical Physics. There's a Medical Physics group. There's a Biophysics group. We then have the Institute of Physics and Engineering in Medicine, which is another organisation which has other special interest groups. There's a plethora of those. There's the British Nuclear Medicine Society, I think. The BIR, the British Institute of Radiology. There's the IET. We frankly have too many of these groups,
yeah.
But there must be more groups around Europe which have such things.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I looked at some programs of physical chemistry conferences, and quantum simulation is largely absent. So we should kind of let those people know what's coming down the pipeline in X years, and they may want to divert some of their efforts in our direction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can indeed help also with developing use cases. So yeah. Great idea. Any more? Yeah.
Somebody, yeah.
I'm just wondering if the, let's say, industrial platforms behind the pentacalls, like Aeneas, Artemis, and EPOS, are already connected to the flagship. And if not, I would suggest that makes sense to me.
Okay.
Thank you. They were on the list indeed, but I think the actions were quite limited so far. Well, this working group just started.
Yes.
But thanks for reminding. If there are no urgent suggestions now, can always send in later.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, you can send it to us. And if you come to me, I can give you a card as well, and you can contact me. That'd be really, really useful to get the input from you, because yeah, the more we know, the more we can reach out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anke. Next topic is the activities of workshops, which is the short title. And George Tudasi can introduce this topic.
Thank you, Roger. It's a pretty short task in that sense, but it's very vital in the innovation part, and I think we should definitely promote more of the workshops from the perspective of industry. I'm speaking here in the name of a network in Switzerland composed of 40 professors in quantum since 10 years, and I'm doing technology transfer in this area. And it's a typical bottom-up approach where we pick up leads and things when they develop. If the startups develop, if things develops, we start supporting this kind of activities. And I think we should also see our activity here in the workshop community area as a bottom-up approach. We should find out the leads which are mainly centered around industry and connect them to our academic projects. So therefore also the projects which are selected, and everybody who is involved in industries should pick the leads and see where their partners are working, in which kind of conferences and workshops do they work, and bring in this kind of leads from the outside perspective, not from the academic perspective. We'll be seeing the first quantum flagship event, big event, will be in February in Grenoble. But I suppose it's going to be a wrap-up of things which we discuss here. We'll be synthesizing and we'll be concentrating the information from here. Nevertheless, I would suggest for all participant projects and the rest, which are also not selected, to combine their efforts in taking that part of the quantum flagship, which is the business perspective. So we should rethink how we connect to the industries, because once we strongly engage the industry in our workshops and in our community, the information and also the technology flow will be a different one. In general, I would suggest to keep this exchange from us to industry and involve them more and more. And as a good example, I would say is the Quantum Industry Day, which happened a few weeks ago in Zurich, where we aimed for 200 participants and we ended up with 300, where 60% were actually industry partners, 5 to 10% were financial companies which which are interested in getting involved in the quantum business. And this was the first time we basically launched this kind of dialogue towards the business and towards the industry. And I would suggest to kind of open up the mind in this direction. And here for the podium, I would say, please come in with all possible suggestions you will have on your screen.
Nobody.
No suggestions.
So you don't care how we spend our time? We could work for your topic or your domain, or otherwise we pick others? Or already fully satisfied with the actions we have started out with? Or you have issues with the after lunch dip, that might also be, of course. No ideas how to connect other potential users or applicants from your area?
Well, the call is basically a call to suggest us all possible platforms, and we'll collect this information and we'll present it in the next meeting in Grenoble. We have already a small short list, but the more of the different perspectives you can bring in, the better it will be also for all the projects you'll be endeavoring in the next 5 to 10 years, I would say.
From other fields, I think they're addressing this challenge through dedicated end-user workshops. So you have like Quantum for the finance, or Quantum for the industry 4.0, and Quantum for whatever, yeah? So if you dedicate, it's not just because this quantum industry today sounds very broad. I mean, it's very impressive, the numbers you said, yeah? But I think you should really focus on some certain application areas where you just invite the stakeholders there and showcase what is the added value of quantum, and in a good performance trade-off with the cost associated to it. So this maybe might be successful.
Okay, we get your point. A bit of focus in these workshops to get more in-depth discussions. Another suggestion?
Yeah, maybe also something specifically looking at startups, spin-offs from academia themselves in the arena of quantum technology. To have a special session, maybe not a complete conference, but maybe a special session in one of those.
Yeah, thank you. And there's one behind you over there. Yeah.
No, in general, I don't know if you're going to talk about this later on, but when it comes to the, it's not only about dedicated workshops. I think that we could achieve a high impact precisely by bringing the word to general industry or general other industry events or workshops, etc. I mean, I work for Telefonica, for a big operator, and there are several opportunities in which you can go for, to really well-attended conferences. Well, not conferences, they are industry events. They are not conferences in the academic sense, in which, well, if you go there and you tell about results or early pilots, it's something that you can gain a lot of impact in the industry. It's something that we had made in the past with other technologies. And well, it's something we have in mind precisely within, in particular, Civic. That is where we are, and it's something that I think is a good opportunity. And I would like to invite all of you that have the opportunity, as someone in the front rows mentioned, that the idea of specializing is even not only specializing the workshop. It's probably going to workshops dedicated to anything else in which you can introduce the matter.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, two more, and then we move on to the next topic, I guess.
Hi, hello. I was thinking if a workshop idea could be perhaps an event of matchmaking between startups and corporate, because that's also needed.
Good suggestion, and you wish you would have known what the next slide would be? No problem. The order of, you had a suggestion as well?
Same as you said, but also with the venture capital industry. Have a showcase day for startups and have all the VCs come, etc.
Thank you very much for the suggestion. It's a good one.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And let's move on to the next topic. Like you would know, more on the business side with the venture capitalists and the SMEs. So, Katal, maybe you can kick off.
Okay, thank you. As you can see here, I've listed some of the key activities that are currently ongoing, as well as some of the planned activities, and there is a certain element of overlap with some of the other subtasks. But one of the main things is that we're currently developing a curated list of venture capitalists, both regular and corporate, so that we can see who is actually investing within quantum technologies. And in addition to this curated list, we're also going to add metadata, so we can get an overview of what type of areas are they investing in. Is it hardware, software, sensing, communication, etc.? And also at what stage are they at? Are they kind of A round, B round, or are they seed or whatever? So that is an activity that is ongoing. And to complement that, then we've also extended the size of the working group so that we've included representatives from European VCs as well, so that we have that information and that knowledge in-house as well, as it were. Another thing that was just alluded to in the previous subtask, we're currently investing how best to reach out to involve SMEs and industrial partners through an industry day or a showcase, as was just mentioned as well, where you can invite in a whole load of VCs and then have a number of cases pitched for them. But before you do that, then you need to do number 4, which is essentially you need to develop these cases for the VCs and for the industrial partners. And that's something that we're in the process of developing that, but we really, really need to think about this very, very carefully and make sure that we have developed these cases in a very clear manner before we start inviting the industrial partners in and the VCs in. The VCs, that is the basis for making their decisions, but for the industrial partners, it's basically the starting point for a dialogue as well, and we also need to be very much aware of that too. So that was basically what I have to say, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
I think the matchmaking suggestion fits in nicely, but are there more of these?
Yeah, I think this is a very important point. I think I like this much more than the workshops, because this seems something real, that something is happening rather than just talk. I think what would be probably important to note here, what could the flagship to do to help the VCs to invest in these startups? I mean, a lot of VCs have a lot of interest in quantum technology, quantum computers, because they've heard about it so many times. They think now that, okay, this is very important, but they don't know almost anything about it. They just, have read the news. And then they have a lot of doubts that should they invest now, if not, when, and what technology they should invest in. It's challenging for them to get accurate factual information on these things. And I think here the flagship could help. You could make some sort of VC package. I mean, potentially together with the startups, and you should first find out what are the startups, what are all the startups, because you don't even know that, right? And then to make this sort of packages that you could help the startups to get the VCs really, on the level that they can then make the decision to invest.
I'm not sure the flagship can be in a position where it says this technology is a dead end, and then somebody with a community comes with a startup that goes along those lines. So there may be other ways of answering this need, but what I'm pretty sure people from this community need is help building a business plan and all sorts of kind of support you need in order when you approach a VC and you don't come from this world. Like in Silicon Valley, you learn how to build a business plan, from day one. In this community, not so much. So governments usually have support for this, but people aren't really aware what government agencies exist to help startups. And we don't need to kind of create this entity on our own, but we need to expose to people what already exists and match.
Thank you. indeed it is more about how we can we help, especially these startups, in preparing for discussing with the VCs. And for example, Cathal is that kind of people we have in our community can help telling you that one VC is not the other. They're quite different one to another, and one might fit you better than the other. Exactly. That kind of trainings are possible.
Yeah, just a comment as well on the whole thing with the VCs, because I mean the quantum technologies there's like a broad spread of technologies, and they're at different stages of maturity as well, which also means that it's going to be a very, very different type of pitch for, say, something that can come to market within a 2 or 3 year time frame, which may not be kind of hard quantum, say universal quantum computer, but is still maybe something which has a huge or large market or large segment of the quantum research field. So we need to be aware of that as well when we're crafting these business cases as well, that we're very much aware of what the time to market is.
Yeah, so just to echo how important this is, in terms of the role of startups in really kickstarting a new industry and ecosystem in this area, which is what we've promised. In a few things that we've done, both at UCL and more generally that I can share. First of all, we run, I think it's important to realize the critical nature of the individuals in creating these startups. So you have to be very driven to want to do that. You need to understand that. So if we want to make the early career researchers and PhD students and postdocs consider this as a career path, we need to give them the kind of training in entrepreneurship and what that means, so that they can begin to consider that as a potential route. Another point is about the shortage of skills in this area. We know already that our students are going off to work for companies in the US and other startups that are attracting lots of people, and this ties into I think the education session, which is happening next door, but that's been identified as one of the key barriers to growth. And a third point, which is identified in a sort of barriers for startups session that we run in the UK, is around access to facilities, that sometimes there's a capital investment that goes into setting up fab and so on that can be prohibitively expensive for a startup. So thinking about how we can open up facilities, not just things like fab, but maybe more specialized measurement facilities and so on, how can we open them up to startups to help lower the barrier to entry so that they can at least start making some progress.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, there's quite a difference from one university to another in the way this is part of the culture, and if you happen to be a spin out of another university, there still should be ways to help also these SMEs or spin-offs.
Yeah, no, I could just add a comment. I mean, particularly for hard tech, unencumbered access to facilities which are traditionally at universities or government labs is really, really crucial for the success of the startup. So I agree 100%, John.
Okay, thank you. And I think John made already the bridge to the next task, nanofabrication and all the challenges with it. Martijn Hek can introduce this topic to us.
Yeah, so this task is basically about trying to find synergy between, let's say, already existing efforts or already existing technology platforms that can be very mature, and on the other hand, what is or would be needed for this community, for quantum technology, basically the engineering part here. When I say synergy, it's of course trying to identify what is, and that is what we will be doing and are doing, trying to identify what is already out there, while at the same time looking and mapping what is needed here. So I think it should be clear, and that's why there's a double-sided, double pointing arrow, that a lot of these technology platforms are not completely fitting our needs here. So it's very important to maybe start that discussion there a little bit. Just to highlight three here, CMOS, electronics, photonics has been discussed quite a lot here, and superconductive platforms. These are a little bit in different stages of maturity. I want to highlight, though, one platform a little bit, because first of all, Superconductive is, we need to really get the ball rolling there a little bit. That is really quantum related. CMOS, I think most of us know that there are quite mature access platforms for that, like Europractice. Photonics is a new, is a little bit of the odd one out, a little bit new to the scene, so maybe it's good to give you a little bit of flavor there. If you can go to the next slide, or can I do that? Or? Oh. Because this is sort of a new effort set up over the last decade, mimicking the CMOS idea from a fabless integration, where you can even have your IP on fabless, on just designs and sell that. Where we have design houses, etc. We try to mimic that in photonics too, where you have design support, where you have software that is suited for this kind of work. You have foundries where you can either do full wafer runs, but also start playing around with little multi-project wafers for various technologies, whether it's silicon, whether it's indium phosphide, whether it's silicon nitride. And you have correspondingly packaging facilities that you can actually use it. Well, to give you some kind of help here, access, and for you to gain familiarity with these platforms is shown to the left-hand side. We have brokers like EpixFab for silicon photonics, like Yapix for indium phosphide photonics and silicon nitride photonics. And if you're even one step before that, if you're really new to the field, we have European funded projects like Pix4All and like ActFast, where you can really start a discussion and see, what can we mean to each other. It's very important to get the ball rolling and to get mutual impact in input here, so I hope we get some here on how we can make the synergy happen.
Andreas Wahrer from Zurich. So I do think maybe it's very valuable to think about these approaches, but I think there needs to be a lot of process development also for many of these applications that I know about and that I would be interested in, and people in our field would be interested in, as I believe, would require really to develop processes beyond what is existing currently. So it's not only of getting access to existing processes and using them in a new context, but it's developing these new processes, and you need to think about how you will do that and with which funds.
Well, if I may add something here, and I was planning to say that. Yes, you're completely 100% correct there, but I think on the list here there's a project called Unicorn. They use the process of, I think, smart photonics. So it could be true for some of the approaches, yes, definitely, but it's maybe also interesting to see for which other approaches, for which other technologies, there's a more direct overlap. So there's definitely in the Unicorn project, there's a direct one-on-one overlap, for example.
So I guess I do find this relevant. I think one of the challenges of this is that somehow you need a specialist at your level who talks your language to come in at the to a foundry or something to make them do some work for you. So I think we've had success with one of those in that they now will put metallization into their foundry, and that was an extra thing that was needed for ion trap chips. But funding is useful to persuade them to do that, of course. This is sort of experimental, but with a little bit of funding you can persuade them to do these things, so it's useful.
So for specialists, top left. Pix4All.
We have a suggestion over there?
Yeah, just a little bit on this funding. I think we tried in 2015 and 2016 to convince the people from Photonics 21 to look into this quantum domain, and we talked there at the Photonics 21 workgroup sessions and the dedicated workroom sessions, and either the problem that time was to communicate the impact. Yeah? So either the big industries there, also I have to say unfortunately the European Commission, they didn't see the point in investigating into some quantum-grade platforms for whatever reason. Yeah, it was not really good reasons, but it was a clear no against this to go to this quantum lab because there were some more pressing challenges to be solved with the same money. So before going to these people, I think you need to make a very good case that they cannot counter with some arguments. Yeah, you need some thinking before going into this, because we already tried once and we failed.
There's one question in the back by Victor.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I'm not sure how this picture is intended, because it seems to give a picture of many individual entities, but for instance, I think Technobis, Smart Photonics, Lyonics, Synopsys, Bright Photonics, Japix, and I think even Fraunhofer work together in something in the Netherlands, in the Eindhoven and Delft region, in Photon Delta and the Photonic Integration Technology Center. So I think there's already kind of this integration towards a mature photonic ecosystem going on. So I don't think a smart approach would be to kind of try to approach all these different steps individually, but actually approach the platforms like that. Because they already have a roadmap and a vision getting towards integrated components. And I know, for instance, for what I just mentioned, quantum technology is on their roadmap. So I think a lot of this stuff is already going on from the other side also.
Yeah, true. That's why we took photonics, integrated photonics as an example, because the field is kind of organized. And for example, Act Fast is a nice way for especially small companies to get introduced in this field, and you get appointed to the specialist. But we do not want to stick to photonics. The question was also, do we have other domains like CMOS devices, where we'd like to see a similar organization of the field happening?
Just to highlight for CMOS, of course you have Euro practice, for example, that already covers a lot of the, the horizontal chain here, right? For CMOS, if you go to organizations like Europractice, they cover software, foundries, probably packaging too. So, but that is already a well-established approach. Here, if you go to the brokers, they help you with the whole thing. So it's the same kind of role. So for CMOS, photonics, it's sort of established there, yes.
And I think with CMOS, the well-known parties, well, you can ask them, you know them, but they are not always willing to add new processes to their fabs, but that's why they're too big, and especially the more smaller foundries that we do have in Europe are most interested to our quantum community, I guess.
But I think that is actually also one of the questions we have to you. I mean, at the moment you know these processes a little bit. I mean, there are of course partners that are more on like IMEC, like Leti, who are within the CMOS industry more willing and more interested also in maybe, okay, let's explore what we can do here to tweak the process. So if there are relatively minor changes, that is interesting too. So if that feedback if that ball is rolling, that's great.
Okay, well, one more suggestion and then we move on to the use cases.
But the question is, do you actually know what you want from the CMOS fabs to improve? Because they are now going to a 40 nanometer and lower and lower and lower. I don't think this is the focus you have. So I think you should really collect the specs you need to see what is to be done, because I'm not sure if this is very clear at this point.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we have to, and for most individual questions, these big foundries will not move. But if we have a kind of a roadmap or what we like to see, what kind of materials to process, then we may have more involvement of these foundries and get a more positive answer to your questions. Okay, thank you very much. So far for this example. Let's discuss the use cases and the development thereof. Philippe, can you introduce the topic?
So in the Q flag, we have proposed to strengthen the part for end users. And in fact, we believe that this is crucial to have many different actions for end users, not only think about innovation, what we can do, what great thing we can propose to somebody, but maybe start with the needs and try to merge the needs with the possible things we have already available. So this is why we believe it's crucial action. We work together with Thomas on this. So Bosch and CA are involved in this work package for the next Q flag. But we start working already as an integrated team with the QSA, as you have seen. So we are not two separated teams, but a unique action to support the flagship. Next slide. What we have proposed together is to have two kinds of actions. A first one on what we may call early adopters. This means that we focus on communities, which can be in the industry or in the academy. This can be large organizations like CERN or this kind of potential users. The good point is that those communities, they know what high-tech means, and they are able to work with the quantum community about the specification. And those communities, quite often, they do not have issues with the cost. What they want is the performance. And sometimes they dream about a factor 10, but maybe if you can provide a factor 2, it's already a major step. And so we have seen in the past, if we think about using, for example, space as a booster, not for only the rocket, but also for the technology. This was a joke. You can laugh, but so you can use those as a kind of booster for the different technologies. Moreover, quite often those are very high educated engineers type and physicists, and so they can understand very fast what is going on, and so we can go into a co-design. So this is one type of action. And the second one is to address the mass market and to try to see larger, broader applications. We may see in the flagship that depending on the pillar, you may have different level of maturity. So, for example, the sensing, you may have very soon, if you're able to measure, for example, a magnetic field with a high precision, you have many, many applications. For example, everything which is rotating, you can measure because you just have to measure to put a small magnetic field and you will measure the variation. So you may have application directly, or for example, a universal computer. We know that this may take some time. So this mass user, mass market type of action will be focused on the different markets depending on the maturity. And so those are the two type of things we have to do. A basic tool is to organize brainstorming and workshop, but then we will try to also monitor as time is going on how the things are progressing. And we are welcoming any ideas, and this is why we are discussing now the possibilities. We have scheduled those two avenues, early users, high-tech, and mass production, depending on the level of maturity. We will be starting next year. We already started some action this year to see how it works. There will be a meeting about sensors in Grenoble in the middle of December. Contact me if you want to have the connection, I mean the website. There will be next week a meeting at CERN. We are connected with CERN to see what can be done for the computing for the future of CERN in 10, 20 or 30 years. Those we are testing, but when the Q flag is fully in place, this means that we have the money to run workshops, for example. We will be doing those kind of things. So it's just right time now to provide inputs and any kind of comments, and we will take notes and try to do the best. So it's open to proposal and comments, and if you want to have a community we can connect with, there is one over here. Microphone
the microphone is going to John Morton, and then your second.
Okay. You You decide who speaks. This is you. Okay.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I can just repeat that this gravitational wave detection community absolutely should be addressed from the quantum flagship, and if you're interested, I can provide a list of people who can contribute, both from the squeezed light part and also from the squeeze spins part and the combinations of the above.
So you are welcome, provide names. I coming from nuclear physics, particle physics, astrophysics, and astroparticle. So I have those connections, but we welcome names.
John.
So I think the need for applications and use cases is something that I lost track of how many times it was mentioned this morning. But I mean, these workshops and this action, it sounds a great start, but surely, well, I'd be interested to hear your views. I mean, what next? Is that going to be enough to really develop these applications and use cases, or are we going to need also substantial co-funded joint development and research projects funded through the flagship proper to really flesh out these applications together and use these workshops as a starting point for that rather than a complete solution?
Yeah, this is a very important point. You're missing about two avenues. First, I was telling you I was running a big institute taking care of particle physics, nuclear physics, and so on. If somebody was proposing a new technology with a factor 2, we will directly provide the finances in order to have what we dream. Of course, we may think about joint ventures with more risk. It's not sure that maybe we can provide, and then maybe we have to think in the flagship itself if we can help developing some application within the flagship with some co-funding. But I think the important point, people who want performance, this means that the key point is performance. This is not the other type of things, that this is a gravitational wave example. Performance is a key issue. So those communities, they are usually ready to pay for. But they are a small market, it's a niche market, but maybe interesting.
When it comes to simulation, as it goes to chemistry, solid state, etc., I want to repeat something I said previously. There is lack of clarity in terms of what does this community need to provide in terms of computational power, in terms of qubit fidelity, to address specific issues that exist in the field. If you go to physical chemistry, they will tell you what they don't know how to compute. So ask that, and then we need to sit and think, what do we need to provide so that we match? We have runaway expectations right now. People think that in 3 months we will do a superconducting material simulation. That's unlikely. And the reason for this lack of clarity is that there's no number. To do, I don't know, solid state superconducting, you need 500 qubits at 10⁻³ fidelity for a 2-qubit gate. And then we can say, oh, okay, so that's a next flagship, no problem, etc. So we need to be specific about like when we'll be able to do what. And until we do, this conversation with industry is kind of lacking specifics.
Yeah, but this is exactly why we have to connect people. I told you what I was doing before. Now what I am doing, I am the scientific director for all basic research in CEA. This means starting from biology to astroparticle and whatever. So we have tested inside what we can do. And for example, we connected Daniel Esteve group with biologists because on one side they can measure a single spin, not yet, they are at 10 spin per square root of Hertz. And on the other side, we can do RPE for biology with a very huge step. So we need to have the different communities discussing. At lunchtime, we were discussing that maybe we discuss a lot material by design for the future. Maybe we should think about what this community, what we can compute. And maybe we cannot provide a computer to make material by design today, but maybe we can provide very good tests for those simulations today with our quantum different device. But for this, we need a real strong brainstorming. And the first barrier is a barrier of understanding. So we need to have the same vocabulary. The second barrier is a barrier of understanding what is needed and what you can do. And we need to find how to tune those two things. If they remain like this, we do nothing. If they are like this, but we can bring them together, then maybe it's a first application. But this, we need input and we need really brainstorming. Yeah. No, but when we say workshop, we think about workshop on invitation. We think that part of the workshop will be on invitation. It will be open, but we will invite specific people to come to discuss. And we welcome names.
First, I give you the microphone. Okay. Rainer Erdmann from Picogram Berlin. I think it's a fantastic idea to start with these workshops, which hopefully will generate a long list of potential use cases. You haven't a clear understanding if they will be feasible or not, but are there already ideas how to identify really the hotspots to find a center of mass which is worth to continue? And any idea to make these workshops per definition will be on invitation 50% open, but to make it maybe a little bit more transparent, to make the selection process, the information gaining process on a more broader scale, to really pick the right ones, because our resources are limited. We don't have 5 opportunities. The first shot should be already a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have time to have for the debate, but thanks for your input. And I think I've more people suggested it have to be more focused than in this during this ramp-up phase. The final two, and then we have to stop. You first.
Right. I just want to highlight that maybe. Yeah, repeating a little bit what they said is that, you know, it's not only about the workshops or connecting people, but I would actually want to see some outcome of this, some concrete, you know, outcomes. Maybe on the quantum technology flagship pages, we could have, you know, the use cases and what do you exactly need. I mean, and it may not give immediate performance to anybody, but I think it would be still important to have those, you know, for the future.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the output of the workshop will be also a report. This is what we are planning. This is not just discussing for discussing, but try to have first documents about some possible applications.
I also agree that the workshops are a very good idea, but I want to make sure that we understand one thing. We all know that the hardware is not there yet, so we have to invest a lot in hardware. But on our side, which is the side of doing algorithms, we also have to make clear that the algorithms are also not there. We need a lot of work on the algorithmic side. It's not that the use cases are there, just writing that down on a web page and then we are done. We need a lot of work and a lot of effort on the algorithmic side. There's no point in doing the hardware if we don't know what we're going to use it for. And this is not just a matter of a workshop. We need real work and real research on developing new algorithms.
Yeah.
Point taken.
Yeah, point taken.
And like your nearest neighbor already mentioned, also not overselling, because if a few of us start overselling, you spoil it for all of us. And we are in this flagship together. I think we should stop almost, but we're not kicked out yet. So make use of the reigning time. We have two other topics that are a bit newer, but you can give your input already. So we didn't do actually anything on this yet. Standardization, also for the European Commission, some people address this topic now. What can we do and how should we organize? If you have concrete suggestions, they are more than welcome. And the other thing, of course, the protection of IP or IPR, and people using different words for sometimes the same things or the other way around. It's a topic that we will address next year, but it would be good for us if we can start based on some suggestions by you. Anybody to kick off this topic? Or do you want us to start with a blank sheet? Well, the sheet isn't fully blank. Okay.
Well, related to the IP, what I have, seen is that, maybe one problem has been that you didn't start working on that before the call. I think the flagship needs some sort of joint guidelines and rules for the IP and for the use of the IP. Because, well, now all the projects have been doing their own consortium agreements, but there is no joint agreement. And I think this is a key thing, and it should have been there before the call, so that everybody knows what they're signing up to when they were putting out the proposals. But now, that's we can't change that. So let's try to work for the future to do that.
Sorry. Just quick question on standardization. Maybe it should be those cross-topic proposal. It's not just the QSA or the Q flag, but more a project by itself. Not basic science here, but cross-topic.
But that could be needed an idea on how chopping the field in different portions, and maybe one field needs a different way of standardization and IP protection than another field. That's maybe something to consider before we go into it. Yeah, I understand. Okay. And well, Thomas, you already have good discussion with the European Commission on this material. Okay, in view of the time, we have to stop. So thank you for your input. I repeat, your input is always welcome, either by email or by phone. And the next meeting in Grenoble in, what is it, February 18th, I believe, is the next time we will be physically together. So you're all welcome to join there. But that exact contact details will be announced later. Thank you very much.
Hello, please take a seat. We are going to continue. Please take a seat. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Strom. I'm working at Robert Bosch in Germany. And as you may already know, I'm a work package leader in the QSA. So our topic this afternoon is engaging with the QCN, the Quantum Community Network. And it's about the organization of the community. Afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, talking about governance structure is a little bit a challenge, I would say, but I think we will master it together. So this is the agenda, the introduction, this is right now. In the next step, I would like to present the QCN members, the members of the Quantum Community Network Board. I think it's important to know that from the beginning, to be a little bit concrete, and after that we will talk about the organization of the Quantum Flagship community, Jürgen Mlynek from the SAB is going to give a short statement, and also Tommaso Calarco is doing that. And then I will explain the current terms of reference of the governance structure, and we will have a discussion. I hope you have a lot of feedback on that. And in the end, Claudius Klein is going to present the new Qt EU website. So let's start. This is the list of the members of the QCN together with the proxies. So you see all the member states and associated countries. You see the name of the QCN member, and some of the countries also have a member's proxy. And all the people which are indicated in light brown color, they are not yet nominated and not yet officially confirmed. The rest is already confirmed from the board of funders. The QCN chair and the vice chair, they have been elected already in Oberkochen, and the chair is Tommaso Calarco, and the vice chair is Yasser Omar. So this is the whole governance structure of the flagship. You have seen this view graph already several times. I show it again because you will see a division into two parts. So first there is this right part, which is regulated by the quantum flagship terms of reference. And this quantum flagship terms of reference is issued and controlled by the European Commission. I will just say a few words about that in the upcoming slides. And then there's the left part. This is the quantum technology community, which is described in the terms of reference of the community organization. This is issued and controlled by us, by the quantum technology community. And it covers the Quantum Community Network Board and the working groups, which you not see in this view graph. We already informed you that this document, I think it's about 8 pages or so, is available on the Qt EU website. Okay, so let's go into this right part of the governance structure first. The Board of Funders and the European Commission, these are the main decision-making bodies. Then we have the Strategic Advisory Board with Jürgen Mlynek as chair. This is a group of high-level, renowned independent quantum experts, and they have the obligation to monitor the process, the progress of the quantum flagship. They have to provide input for the strategic research and innovation agenda to the European Commission and the Board of Funders, the decision makers, and they also advise the decision makers on any subject of relevance. So next slide is about the Science and Engineering Board, which has been constituted this morning. It is composed of the 20 quantum flagship project coordinators. There are also the 2 program coordinators of Quant-Era, which are observers without voting rights in the SEB. And last but not least, there are 2 Quant-Era project coordinators which have been elected by Quant-Era. So in total it's 24 persons, 2 of them are observers. The core objective is to coordinate the quantum flagship projects and the Quant-Era projects. Then there is the coordination and support action, which is implementing the quantum flagship secretariat, and this has mainly assistance tasks. So now I have 5 slides to explain the organization of the quantum community. These are the upcoming slides. I start with the quantum community network. I start with the community organization. So we envision the whole quantum technology community as an organization, and you have to become participant of this organization. And the participation is open too. This is taken from the terms of reference. Individuals active in research and innovation in quantum technology in Europe on a professional basis representatives of special interest groups of consumers, end-user industries, European cluster organization, other European entities. So these are the stakeholders of quantum technology in Europe. You just submit an application to the Quantum Flagship Secretariat. This is implemented in our webpage, and the participants, they contribute to the missions and activities of the Quantum Flagship. And assemblies are held once a year. So now I noticed that I should have let Tommaso and Jürgen Blüneck talk, sorry for that. So I suggest I continue with these 5 slides, and then, sorry again, so I just forgot it. So the next slide, Quantum Community Network Board. So the Quantum Community Network Board represents the quantum technology communities of all the member states and the associated countries. And the tasks and responsibilities, you can read it here. I just go briefly over it. Identify relevant national stakeholders, represent these stakeholders, coordinate all these activities on national level, act as a go-to person for Quantum Flagship related questions, requests in the national community. So basically this is a vision to the quantum technology organization, which is structured by the nations. The Quantum Community Network Board reports to the Strategic Advisory Board, to the Commission, and to the Board of Funders at least twice a year. And here you see the composition. So each member state or associated country has exactly 1 member and may have 1 deputy member. These persons are high-profile experts. It's very important that they have large networks in their respective countries. They must not be in the Science and Engineering Board, neither in the Strategic Advisory Board. We already have said who is chair and vice chair. The mandate is for 4 years, and they meet also 4 times a year. How are these members determined? So this is a 2-step process which is taking place in each of the member states and associated countries. So first, you have the local quantum flagship community, which is electing 4 candidates for this QCN member. So as I said, this is happening per nation, and this is also going, for instance, via qt.eu website. The voting procedure is also documented in the terms of reference. I think it's not of interest here. So then we have 4 candidates for each nation, and these 4 candidates are given to the Board of Funder, National Ministry representative, and this person will take 1 member and 1 deputy member from this pool of 4 candidates. I think it's important that the last point also, so this QCN member, there's only 1, and this person has represent, first of all, the country, this is clear, and second, also the interests of academic and industry stakeholders. So this is important. We do not have 2 persons here per country, 1 representing industry and the other 1 academics. We only have 1 person which must represent the interests of both of these communities. So then we have the work groups. These work groups are the center of activity regarding strategy development. Each participant of the Quantum Flagship Community Organization is member of at least 1 of these work groups. So you are a member of at least 1 of these work groups, maybe 2, depending on several things. And the responsibility is to prepare the strategic research and innovation agenda, and also involving the whole quantum technology community. We want to be as open as possible, and this is the mechanism how we are that. So you know that there are already two working groups. One is the SRA working group, the other is the innovation working group. Further working groups will be established, and this is done by the Strategic Advisory Board. They will consult the QCN. Okay, so a working group has two chairs. They represent academy and industry. They have a 2-year mandate. So this was my last slide about the structure. So sorry again, then please.
Okay, so since there are some chairs, I will sit. So let me have this panel discussion. So, well, we created the QCN, and we did it in order to make sure that really what I was trying to say this morning and also yesterday happens, namely that our community does not fall apart like the winners and the non-winners. Because this would be very bad under many respects. First of all, it would mean we lose the whole momentum, and this would be bad. Of course, it would be bad for the winners, because if the flagship would not exist in the future, then there will be no more projects. But this would also be very bad for the people who have not gotten the project funded, because only if we continue keeping this, as we saw yesterday with all these government representatives from different countries, if we have this very large momentum, then this will keep the motivation for each country to continue. It means more resources for each one of us. It means more possibilities to be involved in the existing and future projects. And we are, of course, discussing in parallel with the Commission how the next stage will be. And so the worst thing we could do would be to lose this connection, this cohesion in the community, because then it would just be a little subset, a little club going on. Of course, this does not mean that we will have a flagship with all the groups and all the people involved in projects funded by the European Commission, but there will be different initiatives. And how do we keep all of this together? Well, one aspect is the strategic research agenda, which has been discussed this morning, and another aspect is two-way communication with member states. In one direction, we want to make sure that all the opportunities which arise in Brussels are communicated and everyone in the community knows about them. And in the opposite direction, we want to make sure that Brussels knows, is very aware exactly of what each national community wants, what are the directions, what are the resources, what should be the future, what are the issues also, and some of them has been raised today. So this body really has the purpose of effecting this two-way communication. And so it is a tool for the Commission to communicate, to reach out to each country and get support for the European initiative. And it is a tool for all of our colleagues in each country to be connected, to learn about what's happening, and also to give input, to influence the future directions. So many of these people are here today, sitting in the first rows, and in particular, for the discussion, I would like to invite also Yasser Omar, my deputy, to sit here next to me. We have been elected as chair and vice chair of the Quantum Community Network in the last meeting we had in Oberkochen. Well, I think I should close this little introduction here, because there will be also a short statement from Jürgen Mlinek about the connection between the Strategic Advisory Board and the QCN. And then I think that we should, together with our colleagues from the QCN, so the national representatives, stay here to sort of address field questions from the audience. We decided on purpose this time, instead of having a closed-door meeting like we had in Oberkochen, just with the representatives, which would be more operational, to have it open to the whole community, because now it's really the moment to make sure that everybody engages with this governance. And even though the governance is the least appealing part, it may be among the most effective to ensure that the flagship goes on. So that's why I'm happy that even though it is late in the afternoon, not everybody yet has escaped this room. So I guess that would conclude my first statement.
Okay. Okay, fine, thanks. Now Jürgen Blüneck.
Hello, everybody. I think most of you probably know me as chairman of the high-level steering committee that has helped to set up the flagship. So in September, I got a letter from the Commission asking me whether I would be willing to chair also the Strategic Advisory Board, and I said yes, also for reason of continuity. This is not official. This has to be rubber stamped. That's my understanding by higher paid wisdom. And this higher paid wisdom also exists in the EU. Is Thomas still here? Is this correct, Thomas? Okay. So the idea is to have roughly 15 members of the Strategic Advisory Board, again composed by representatives from academia and from companies. Again, with respect to companies, a mixture of larger companies, small and medium-sized companies, startups, and also from major research organizations. As you may have seen, there is a call out for the companies to submit, letters of interest by November 15. Then there has to be a selection that's done by the Commission at the end. And hopefully by the end of this year, the Strategic Advisory Board will be established. The first meeting will be then end of January, beginning of February. And we also agreed after discussion with Thomas Gorders yesterday that by the end of next year, probably fall of next year, during the Finnish presidency, we should be ready with recommendations with respect to the full phase. So there is a certain pressure in the system to really get our act together, which means that also the scientific community really has to start working as a flagship so that at the end the Strategic Advisory Board can come up with some recommendations that are really based on findings, facts, and evidence. That's a little bit the plan concerning the strategic research, the Strategic Advisory Board. Our understanding is that we get input from the scientific community on one hand, from the Science and Engineering Board on the other hand, especially with respect to strategic issues. And I will repeat this again at the end of the meeting. We have to act even more strategically than so far. And this also means that we really have to ask ourselves permanently, not only how good are we doing the right things, and are we doing things the right way, but what is going on internationally. Where are our strengths, where are our weaknesses, what are the major players in the field doing, also in collaboration, academia and the private sector, and then readjust, if necessary, also together with the national programs to stay competitive at the global level. And here I think the Strategic Advisory Board can play its role, but it depends on the input from you.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we come to the feedback and the comments. I asked already by email, and I got one email. This was communicated by Philippe Grancher. He says that we have to clarify how the QCN board members will be connected, how they will work together with the other flagship bodies. So, do you have further feedback? Do you have further comments? Go. I recognize you.
Okay, I'm happy to have said that. Can you come back to the previous slide?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very surprised because it's completely different from the one we have seen yesterday by Gustav Kalber. On the one yesterday, there were no upper blue box and there were no red lines. And the feeling was totally different.
Okay, but the colors have been changed, that's true. But I think the remainder should be the same.
I think, well, given that Gustav Kalber has shown yesterday something completely different, I think you should justify this difference, okay? Or maybe somebody should justify it. You remove the black box, the blue box and the red line, then you have a completely different structure from this thing, which is split in two parts, apparently. So since it's exactly the content of my sentence, it gives a completely different feeling about what it is. So I would be happy that you comment on that. Just remove the red lines and upper blue box. You see, it's sort of added. There was a governance. Then it's all balanced between the left and right side, which are both. You remember the thing that Gustav has shown yesterday? So it's not this one. So it's not this one. Yes. Yes.
The picture that Gustav showed is exactly this one.
Without the red lines.
Yes.
Yeah.
The red line on top. Okay, the red lines were not there. They are just for highlighting the red lines.
So there is just this thing up there. It's just a box to highlight that this is the terms of reference of this. So this is what Thomas put there to show that the terms of reference for the quantum community network is something that at the moment the Commission is proposing for us to put on our website and to manage ourselves as a community. So not to fix it in stone in some document that they fix, but just to manage ourselves. And so this is just to clarify the structure. And Thomas wanted to say that there are some terms of reference for the other bodies which the Commission has prepared, and there is terms of reference for the QCN and the whole organization with working groups, which our coordination action has prepared, and I think they are already on the website. So this is the only meaning of these red things over there. Sorry?
That is, it's a whole. No?
Yes. So there is actually there is a joint terms of reference, which is a document which the Commission has put together, and they refer in the section about the QCN. They refer to our website at the moment. This is going to have to be approved by the Board of Funders in their meeting in 2 weeks. The Board of Funders may say, okay, now take what is on the website and put it in the same Word file or not, but the difference is, I would say, not so significant, because both documents refer to each other in terms of having a governance structure which has 3 bodies: the QCN, the Strategic Advisory Board, and the Science and Engineering Board.
This is exactly these 2 documents that we have, but I don't think that this makes a difference. I mean, you can copy those 2 documents together, and then it describes exactly the whole structure. The point for separating this is just that the European Commission is responsible for this right part, and we as a community, we are responsible for this left part, where the Quantum Community Network Board is.
But the Commission's document clearly states that the governance bodies of the flagship are all of these. Okay, so those up there are just the titles of 2 pieces of Word file which are sitting into different places, but they refer to each other, so they are one thing. So that's the only purpose of this slide to show.
Maybe after this discussion, I dare to ask this very simple and practical question. How do I know that whether I'm already inside, signed up to the quantum flagship community? You said that there is an application form online. I think I never put on my any application at the qt.eu website. Instead, earlier on, I have signed up to some newsletters or something. So do I have to resubmit an application or?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So we are building up a new database, and Claudius is going to talk about this in a minute. Yeah, okay.
Just to answer that on a very short term. Due to the new data regulations that we have to rebuild the database, and therefore we changed from you can sign up for a newsletter to you can register as a participant. That is online since the last week actually.
Okay, so if I haven't done in the past week anything, I should go there and sign up.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So if you were there 1 week before, you saw subscribe for newsletter, and now you see register as participant.
Okay, great. So I will go there today and sign up. Then you talked about this election for the board of Quantum Community Network. As far as I understood, and then you showed the names. Had those names gone through this election process, or was that election process for something for the future? I didn't catch that.
So the election process, as we have defined it now, this is for the future. This is a list that we had already a year ago. So that was this National Quantum Network, if you remember. And the status now, as I said, is that most of them have been confirmed so far by the Board of Funders, but still some of these confirmations are pending.
So it's a little bit more subtle than that, in the sense that asymptotically in the future, we expect and we propose that there be in each country consultations, elections, some form of involving everybody who is registered, on this database, who will express whom they would like to be the representative. Yeah? This requires the whole structure, including, the website, but also organization within each national community to be in place. So this is our goal to get in the next several months or perhaps couple years. To start this, to already have a voice of the community, what we did was we put together this board here, and most of these people are already people who have been validated and chosen by their communities. But since this started bottom up in each country in a different way, because we didn't have a joint terms of reference, what happened was that, I don't know, the French community organized itself. They have a scientific committee and an institutional committee, and they have a network, and there are some people who have been nominated which are playing that role. And those people are in this body. And in Italy it is different, and in other countries it's different. In smaller countries, for instance, there was not yet a broadly organized, like I'm thinking of Estonia, okay? There is one colleague that we know of in Estonia, and this guy is the Quantum Community Network person, so it's very diverse. Now we are trying to get, on one end, a mechanism which is open but uniform, so that really everybody in the community can participate, at the same time that this is flexible enough to encompass both cases in which you have a very large community and in which you have just a couple colleagues. To have it, flexible, as well as having people who are well connected both to their colleagues and to their government. Because, for instance, this connects to what I showed yesterday in all this discussion about flagship mission and so on. Yeah? When we have to discuss with the Council of the European Union or program committees to discuss future strategies, that's where it's very important that the people who are here talk to each other, and they also are the experts which their governments would ask whenever there is a question on quantum technologies. Yeah? And this is also the reason why this list of people is going to be validated by the next board of funders, because the government representatives will say, okay, those are the experts that we acknowledge as our reference point here, okay? So there is partly a top-down component and partly a bottom-up component, and in the next years, we are going to harmonize this with a mechanism which is, a little bit towards an election, but maybe not a very formalized election. But we want to make sure that we have the right people which really are not speaking for themselves, but for all the colleagues in the country, and which also really are considered as experts by their governments.
Can I just add something? Can you go back to the, okay, to this transparency? There are errors, so what do they mean? I forgot to say this. The Strategic Advisory Board will have permanent guests. One will be the chair of the Quantum Community Network, one will be the chair of the Science and Engineering Board, and one will be the director or whatever of the Coordination and Support Action. To make sure that there is input from all these communities into the discussions in the Strategic Advisory Board.
Exactly. So these two blue arrows at the bottom, they mainly indicate that information for the strategic research agenda is flowing from the quantum community and the Science and Engineering Board through the SAB to the European Commission. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with the Strategic Advisory Board, because I'm looking at this call for nominations or for applications for the Scientific Advisory Board. What I read here is that it will include 6 members from the industry section, 3 from a research and technology organization, plus 6 independent academic experts. This is all correct. Now, how do we come up with 50 members that you mentioned, or did I misheard it?
That's 15, 15, which is 6 plus 6 plus 3.
Perfect. And then just to recap once again, sort of the research and technology organizations, so universities are not involved, as you mentioned, right? Okay. So if we're not from the industry, then essentially what we can do is to think of the organizations in our countries which would fit into the RTOs.
I mean, Thomas, is he still there? No, he had to leave. Okay. So 6 are from academia, which means from universities. 6 are from private sector, and 3 are research organizations like COR, Helmholtz, or whatever. So that's the idea.
Please.
Thank you. I'm Tonia Polare, QCN of Malta, and I wanted to build up a comment on the clarification made by Tommaso when it's about small countries. Now, Malta is actually a small country, you know, it's a kind of a quantum dot in Europe. And so my question is somehow, as it's related also to Philip once, as no quantum community QCN members can be part neither of FDA, nor of SED, and so on, in case of a very small country, I mean, there may be not enough colleagues that a country is represented in each say body. How do we face this problem if we want to address it in this session?
So it is true that if we take the extreme example of Estonia, in which there is this one group, if this person would coordinate a flagship project, then we would have a serious problem because he would be in the SEB and could not be a QCN according to these rules. Fortunately, this is not happening, so theoretically it could happen. But as I said before, instead of starting with a very nice theoretical construction, which might not be of practical use, what we did is we proceeded pragmatically. Which means that, of course, we have to fix and to improve and to refine the way in which the consensus, the support of all the colleagues, which must be there, is present. But we didn't do it sort of deductively, yeah? And so there is no abstract rules, and we see what is happening. And so if it will happen that, I don't know, you in Malta, you know, will coordinate a flagship project in the future and be in the SEB, okay, we will ask that question. At the moment, that's a possible problem which is not showing up in practice, and so this is how we proceed, because what we want is really the function is not a political body, it's not a parliament. It's really about having, you know, everybody in each country connected and be able to have their voice heard. That's the main point here. I don't know if that also answers your previous question before.
So, further questions, feedback, comments? Everything clear now? Okay, so thank you very much. You are kindly invited to send further comments by email to me. And now the next agenda point would be the presentation of the qt.eu website.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. So that is the last topic on this session. My name is Claudius Klein. I am working for the VDI Technology Center in Germany, and together with my colleague Markus Wilkens, we are responsible for the management of the successful upcoming coordination support action of the European Quantum Flagship that is named QFLAG. I guess most of you have seen slides like this, but don't worry, I will not go into detail here. What you can see is basically that the European flagship, that the European quantum technology flagship is not a straightforward thing. We have a lot of different stakeholders, we have a lot of different expectations, we have various member states involved, we have a real complex structure. And if we want to make this flagship fly, we really have to take into account all the needs and expectations from different stakeholders. So we have to come up and build one common, open, European Qt community. We really have to take into account all industry, academia, RTOs, students, startups, press offices, journalists, governance organizations, and all other activities from member states, and we have to form one common European community. One tool to do that is the web portal qt.eu, which a lot of you have already visited. You can find on this web portal information about Qt, information about the quantum technology flagship, information about the support action, information about the QCN member list and activities of the QCN, and also, as Thomas already mentioned before, the terms of reference for the community. Then, a couple of days ago, we had to remove the newsletter subscription button, and the reason is data safety, and the other reason is that we want to provide you with additional services. That means that you are now asked not only to fill in basic information like name and email address, but you may also fill in additional information like what is your personal expertise, what are your area of interests, what are your topics of participation if you do want to participate on this project. You can also fill in skills or equipment that you can offer or that you are looking for. What we will build up with that is a database to provide you the best possible service and to provide you the best possible connecting. So why should you register? First of all, it's absolutely free. Only registered person will get the latest information. As I already said, this replaces the newsletter subscription that was online before. We will, of course, send around within the next couple of days a reminder email and explain you the process. However, you will get the latest information if you are registered. You can also register to working groups. You can actively support the Quantum Flagship. You will get the best possible networking. And of course, as reason that the strategy of the flagship will be influenced and managed by the community, you are important. So it is really important that you register and take place on that. So, but that is not the whole story. To show you where we started, where we are, and what we will have next for you, I will present you a very rough roadmap. In April 2018, Tommaso launched the website at the Great Community Meeting in Oberkochen at SAIS. And we are now somewhere at the end of 2018. However, there will still be a great update of this website in November or December this year. We will add additional functionalities like an event calendar, like a job portal. We will have a quantum directory where RTO, universities and hubs can register with local information, a speaker and expert database. And we will also add a project database where you can find all the information about the running projects. Then, planned for summer next year, we will also add additional functionalities like participants can edit their user profiles. We will have matchmaking, and you can also form group of interests. At the end of next year, we are planning hopefully to add voting procedures, ranking procedures, co-working, cooperation tools, and shared services, and many more. Right now we are in the beta testing phase of the update that is coming at the end of next year. As I said, there will be a quantum directory where you can register as expert and university or company, and this information will be displayed completely public in a database. However, the projection is not really nice. What you should see on that one, and what I see on the display over here, is that there is a landscape. You have a map where you can see where which participant and which hub is present and what area of applications will fit to them. You will have, of course, details about the directory entries, and you can make your directory entry directly on the website in an online application form. We will also have an event calendar where you can see upcoming events. Events are displayed with location, with address. You have an event description. You also can have an online application form depending on the event, if that is allowed or possible or not. Deadline information and many more. And again, also here, you are able to create and submit your own event. So if you are hosting or get to know some specific event that may be interesting for the community, you can directly post it on the website. Also, we will have a job portal where you can see job opportunities that can be offered by the community. With job description, you have an online application form, contact information, and of course, also here, you can actively add this information on the website. The last point, we will have the project database with information about the running projects, and you will have also a participant list and project descriptions. So again, if you want to stay tuned about the activities of the Quantum Flagship, follow us on Twitter, #QuantumFlagship, and please register as participant on our web portal, qt.eu. And with that, I would like to thank you.
So then we want to conclude this session and go to the next session, which is about the concluding discussion. I'm looking at Tommaso. He's not looking at me. So, thanks for looking at me. I want to say something to you. We can go to the next agenda point.
Actually, I was having a conversation about the next agenda point. Yes, so seriously now. Because, okay, we have a wrap-up, and, of course, Jürgen Mlinek will address us with a sort of a final summary from his perspective.
But rather than just, and we had the opportunity to maybe say, okay, let's have a rapporteur from every breakout session tell us what happened. But we thought that this may be redundant, and so what we would like to use this last part, this last half hour, or maybe even a little less, is the following. We had a certain structure here. Well, we started our coordination action, established this QCN, but maybe there are questions, maybe we should change it, okay? So how did it come to be? How should it work in the future? And we had some feedback on that. Then we also, established which should be the topics of these parallel sessions, for instance, of these breakout discussions. But maybe there are topics which are not covered there, yeah? For instance, let me throw this into the space, and maybe there can be some comments on that. And this is what I was discussing with Andrea Ferrari, who is a member of our flagship, but he's also a big boss of the Graphene flagship. He's the chair of the management board, I believe, of the Graphene flagship. So I was having this conversation because they have a lot of experience, partially different from us, of course, into how you strategically structure things. And one thing that Andrea has mentioned in some conversation we had, but also other colleagues have raised, is, well, you can call it in different ways. One way to call it is there are some missing topics. There are some topics that should be added. And I mentioned a couple examples which just occurred to me. One is in the ramp-up phase, there is no really no project centered on discrete variable quantum communication. There is no project centered on quantum software. There is no project centered on semiconductor quantum computing. There is no project centered on space quantum communication, yeah? And some of these things have been submitted, some have not, but clearly the point is not, oh, my project was not funded. The point is what should belong into the flagship, and are we covering everything where Europe should be present? So this is a topic about strategic selection of topics, strategic evaluation, if you wish, that is a little bit open. We are discussing also with the Commission, should we improve this? How to do that? That's not trivial, because we asked for a peer review call. So what we got is the result of a peer review call, but maybe we realize there is room for improvement. How do we do that? This is an example of something that, is really coming out of the discussion, conversations we are having in the formal groups and in the corridors and with different colleagues. Is it something we should make a topic of a discussion in Grenoble of? Because if we did, then it would mean we want maybe to have, like we have documents on education, on innovation, on computing communication, maybe we should have a critical document, a real memorandum, giving some input or asking some questions to the Commission about how evaluation is made or how strategic planning is made. This is important for the Strategic Advisory Board as well. This is a possible topic, just as an example of something that we did not have in our conversations, but might be relevant. And I'm saying this not because I had thought about this before, but because this is really emerging from conversations I had with colleagues, including now, which prevented me from listening to what Thomas said. So, for me, the most important part of these 2 days is that I got a lot of this feedback from colleagues. Now, of course, we don't have time to talk 2 more hours about this, but maybe if we could have a little bit of indication, gather a little bit of feedback, is the structure in terms of titles of discussion groups that we are having here, is it fine? Should we drop something? Are we missing something? That's for me the real wrap-up, which should really, take us towards Grenoble and make something useful out of it. So I am looking for comments on that. Oh, this is horrible. Sorry? No, I don't want to hear that. So thank you, I'm very pleased, thank you, thank you, thank you. We could, put many flowers, some pink flowers possibly, on ourselves and say how good we are. But that's not very useful. Yes?
I found the structure well organized. So one suggestion, but as I think that one of the hot topic was the role of basic science, that is, say, the basis of all the pillars somehow, to have it to have it a plenary session, because it was not, it was with the science this time. So this is my suggestion.
Okay, this is clearly also something that has been discussed by several people, so we take it up, someone is taking notes, and then I think Claudius, and I think we are going to put that in the report that we're going to give to the Commission. So now someone is hopping around when people raise their hands. Yes. So and Harry and Eugene and Radu.
So Tommaso, speaking of basic science, we should probably reflect also on some efficient way of funding that part, because it's actually not true that basic science got only 20 million euro from the Commission, because it got 32 million euro from the first Quantera call. It's going to get 15 other million euro from the second Quantera call, and it's going to get another 45 million euro possibly from the third Quantera call. So overall, that makes quite a substantial amount of money. So this is atomized in small projects. Quantera project size is of the order of 1.5 million. And in the flagship, the 7 basic science projects are 3 million. So we should basically get some reflection on what is the size of those projects, how to efficiently fund that in our field. So I mean, it's important that basic science is present. We are all convinced about that, but we really also need to reflect on how we want to efficiently fund that.
Okay, so basic science, efficiently funding, and then there is also the question about strategic planning. Harry.
Yes, so Tommaso, you summarized a bunch of things that were missing from the flagship currently, and that was also one of the questions that was put forward during this meeting. And I think your suggestion to have at the Grenoble meeting some of these topics being represented, I think that's an excellent idea to have continuity of this idea present also in the upcoming conference. And so I support this idea of having maybe a special session for the topics that were left out, so that these can be somehow joined to the flagship.
Okay, so again stressing, topics which are left out and having a dedicated discussion there as an input to the strategic agenda. Eugene.
So there was a talk at some point of getting a all-European list of companies which are interested in quantum technologies. Is that something that is being done?
That's a question for Rohir. Rohir, where are you? Oh, yes. Okay, so Rohir will answer that question. Are we going to have a list of quantum companies?
Do we have a list? Well, we were thinking about indeed building a database like that, but only if we really believe that is useful. I mean, it's easy to fill a database with I don't know how many entries, but I'm not sure whether it helps to make a full list for the whole quantum domain. So if you have some suggestions, that would be more than welcome. That's also one of my remarks in general for this general feedback. You will see that, I don't know, computation may move faster than metrology or the other way around. And different parts of the flagship will move faster than the other. So I would like to suggest that we think about what are the topics that we still discuss as a complete community to keep this community together in this single boat, and what topics do we address in individual pillars or other parts that move faster or slower.
So for me, this is a topic that needs to be taken up further in the innovation working group. And so Eugene, I don't know if you're a member of that, but this is the place to ask these questions and carry out further this conversation, I guess.
Who is the innovation group?
Sorry?
Who is the head of the innovation?
At the moment, so he asked who is the boss of that, and at the moment it is Thierry Debucher, and in the future it will be Rohir.
I think that, this is of paramount importance. And of course, we don't want just to fill out the database, but you know, if every QCN tries to think kind of what is the, I don't know, top 10 companies or whatever who showed some interest or might be interested in something, and then we collect this database.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to address Francesco's point on the funding of basic science in the flagship. I'm not sure I agree with you. You're probably right that Quantera is essentially basic science. My understanding is not completely, and this is not a criticism, just my observation. What I think would be dangerous, and I was deducing this potentially from your words, is that we see Quantera as the mechanism to fund basic science outside the flagship, right? We agree, right? And I think this would be very dangerous. I think it's very important. It's great to have that complement, and it's very, very important, but it's also extremely important to keep basic science inside the flagship, in my opinion, because the flagship shouldn't just be Europe running after the American companies or China and trying to catch up. We have to distinguish ourselves with some new ideas, and these new ideas normally come from these basic science exploratory projects. So I think it's very important that this is always kept in the flagship to keep it competitive.
Thank you. So I would like to underscore, we are not now opening up any discussion of any specific topic. We are, and I take the liberty to say that because my esteemed vice chair was saying that, so I am sure that he will not be upset by this comment, but it's very important that we are gathering, we are collecting, topics for the structure of the next, and most of what I heard until now is, okay, let's keep this and that in mind for the next one. But the content of what we will discuss in Grenoble, we are not discussing it now. Okay, now there's Radu, and then you, and then maybe people over there. Yes, okay.
Yeah, so basically I just had a few comments. This is kind of follow-up of what I was saying yesterday about the two-speed countries, faster country and slower countries. So what I think it will be helpful for me as a QCN would be a kind of toolkit of how to pressure, how to launch a national program, because there are countries who don't have national programs, national initiatives in quantum information. So Estonia, as you mentioned, it's just one member. So I think for these countries in which the community is less developed, underdeveloped, we will really need some help or some kind of toolkit or use cases and that sort of things to kind of bootstrap and accelerate this process. Okay.
Cool. So that is how to launch, toolkit for launching national programs.
Besides this discussion on which topics have been missed, I think another question is which instruments have been missed. Are you familiar with the network of excellences? Yes. Yes. If you consider something like this, for example, it consumes, like you say, a network of excellence addressing one thematic pillar, like quantum communication. You invest less than 10% of what you fund in the specifically flagship project, but you get something very powerful out. I mean, as a PhD student, I was involved in some monster like this. It was called Euroforce, and it brought a lot of opportunities to me in terms of networking, in terms of mobilities to prove concepts. I think it's a very good added value, although the European Commission doesn't like it, but you should consider this.
Okay, so I take this maybe more in general in terms of should we consider other instruments that we are maybe not using but could be very productive, and how to get input on which other instruments we should explore, because maybe there are some which could be useful and we are not yet using. So that's again for further on. Angelo?
Okay, Tommaso, you already mentioned that, but I want to stress again the unavoidable importance the space will play in the future, both in terms of technology and also of basic science. How to do that has to be discussed, because the level of funding and the time frame are very much unique for space, but a way can be found. That should be subject of further discussion within the flagship.
Thanks. Andreas?
Yeah, so I think it would be interesting to still better understand how the next selection process will work, like who will do the selections, which will be the strategic aspects that will be looked at when the projects will get selected, and see whether one can do something better or differently. I think it's a very challenging task because all the major players in Europe all submit proposals, and then who will decide about that? Either will will the Americans or Asians decide about who will decide it? But I think there needs to be discussion on how to decide that it doesn't come out. I would not say that it came out randomly now, but it's not clear whether everybody understands why the decisions were taken in the way they were taken. And I would have thought maybe that if you had a two-step process or so, which allows some strategic thinking about what the submissions were and whether maybe one could coagulate submitted projects to get more impact overall. Yeah? Should you have encouraged people to join their projects to get higher impact projects, for example?
So I did not pay Andreas to say that, but this is exactly the thing that Jürgen and myself discussed with Gustav Kalbe over, like maybe 20 minutes ago. As one possibility, let's consider what would make sense. Is it possible? Is it difficult? How to implement that? And for me, this belongs into the same category which Andrea Ferrari was raising, like what is strategic planning in terms of how does this reflect in the evaluation? And that's a question that I keep hearing from many colleagues, and perhaps we should open up a session on this, and maybe Nicolas has comments on that.
Yeah, thank you. So sorry to take again some of your time. Of course, I will be talking again about quantum communication, since this is the field I know best. As Tommaso has already said, there are entire fields that are missing, like a discrete variable QKD, like space quantum communication, and even among the components, the most critical one, which is the single photon avalanche detector, which we need to buy in the US or in Asia. So how can that be? We're not going to change the past, but I think in the future we should take into account a bit more all these roadmaps and strategic reports that we spend lots of time writing. When you do the evaluation, at the end you get a number, you do a measurement, as physicists say, and you know that there is an error bar. And so just taking that literally means just going with random numbers at the end. So we should, at the end, in my opinion, take into account a bit of the intelligence and competence that the entire community put into all these documents. And also, if these documents are useless, it will be very difficult to motivate people like myself and my colleagues to continue writing these kind of things.
Thank you very much. So, well, it's about 20 years that I hear Nicolas from time to time saying that it is useless to have conversations, meetings, and writing documents. Still, we have had a lot of impact with these documents, but still it is very important to keep those objections very much in mind. And again, for me, this connects again with the question, what is the strategic orientation of the whole process, and what is the impact and the weight and the effectiveness of the strategy that we put together into what is then the outcome of the evaluations. Dieter?
Yeah, there's one thing which I haven't heard much about. Maybe I missed it or so. So let's say the present call has put like 50 million euros into the market of this, and this means that there is 25 million roughly probably in personnel. And if you divide on average by 50,000, then this would mean that there is at least 500 positions to be filled. So has the flagship thought about how to fill all these positions at the right qualification level?
The answer is yes, because the flagship is all of us. And I am sure that all of us have started thinking about this. The flagship is no central administration distributing money. It's really all of us involved in this. And still, this is a very important subject which I don't think there is a systematic thinking across the board. So everyone is thinking about this, but just individually. And maybe it would be very wise to have a collective thinking process about this. So this is what I gather, and we will put it in the list of things that may be important to consider.
Thank you very much. Today we had some interesting discussions on science education and public engagement, but I would also like to know how the other thematic elements of responsible research are going to feed into the flagship, such as open access, open science, research ethics, diversity and gender aspects.
Thank you very much. So research and responsible research and innovation is one of the things. Actually, in previous events, we also had input on that, and this is certainly something that I would personally welcome very much as a discussion topic there. Francesco?
Picking up Dieter's point, this is a suggestion as a topic of discussion, how to liaise with the existing, I don't know if this was discussed, but it's certainly something to be elaborated upon. The framework program is one thing, the Marie Sklodowskaya Curie is another program. ITNs, grants there, or co-fund actions there, those are outside the flagship, but should be connected if we want to have an impact on education. So we really have to discuss how to connect with those initiatives.
Thanks. Paolo?
Suggestion for the next time. It would be nice to have a session dedicated to the benchmark with what others are doing outside Europe. We'll know it because we read the news, but I think we'll focus our attention, if we have it officially said, to check where we are and where the others are. Thank you.
We had, so the SEB had a session on that, and such as with international cooperation, this is something that might be more broadly discussed, I guess, indeed in Grenoble and in the future. Are there any? Okay, so that was an efficient session because we had a lot of input, which was very much on target. And it is 14 minutes before the end of this kind of long 2 days. And I may invite then Jürgen Blinek to join me on the stage to deliver a final word.
Well, thank you, Tommaso. I think everybody is probably a little bit exhausted after these 2 days. I think it was great to have been here for this kick-off meeting. I think it's a unique opportunity for the quantum community in Europe to really do something together. My lesson learned, essentially my lesson learned during these 2 days is with respect to the future work of the Strategic Advisory Board, to really take this strategic aspect serious that was already mentioned several times during this final session. I think we really have to benchmark ourselves, not only with respect to the various consortia and so forth that are now financed by Brussels, but we really have to benchmark ourselves against what is going on worldwide. So we have to see what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses with respect to the EU-funded projects, but what can be added outside those projects being funded, because there was a pretty high rejection rate. We heard this again just a few minutes ago, and how these very valuable projects that didn't make it can be somehow involved into the future activities of the flagship. I think that's a major challenge for all of you, also for the Science and Engineering Board. There has to be some kind of regular benchmarking and comparison at the global level, how we are doing, but it's also, I think, an important task for the Quantum Community Network to really give this input to the Strategic Advisory Board so that we can react and then readjust our activities also in the sense that you were mentioning, Paolo. That's one thing. The other thing is, how can we use the national programs to somehow strengthen or complement the activities that are now financed by Brussels? And the challenge here, I think, is to come up maybe also from the national programs to whatever bilateral, multilateral cooperation projects with other European member states. At the end, this is a question of co-financing maybe, but I think we should have some fantasy also to use the member state activities to complement the Brussels activity. So for me, these are the main take-home messages in my function in the Strategic Advisory Board. We need input on what is missing, what has to be complemented in order to be really internationally leading compared to our major competitors, which I see in the US and in China.
No, don't go down, sorry, wait a second, because while you were talking, I was thinking, well, we have the chairs of the two of the three governance bodies here on stage. Too bad we don't have the third, but just because I do not know who the third is, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, because in the last 20 minutes, we have also, I suppose, have the chair of the Science and Engineering Board nominated, and I really don't know who that person is, but can you please stand up and join us on stage? Oh, Thierry, oh, okay. Congratulations. So now Dr. de Bucher will come here and address with a long prepared speech the audience from his perspective on newly elected chair. Please.
Thank you very much, Tommaso. This is always the same with Tommaso. He pushes you into the water, and then you have to deal with that. Thank you. Okay, so as Tommaso said, I was just elected chair of the Science and Engineering Board, which gathers all the projects that have been selected in the ramp-up phase, and plus two representatives of the Quantera project and the two chairs of the Quantera board.
Who's your deputy?
Stephanie Vienna.
Ah, congratulations.
No, she had to leave earlier. So that's, I think it's a good opportunity. Well, it's a good opportunity to go on with the work we already done with the Commission in the framework of the QSA project. Since I had to leave this project because I was involved in a proposal, now I can take this responsibility in the SEB. And of course, the idea will be to collaborate, to develop the collaboration between the project, but also to have contact with all of you. Of course, we are part of the community, and the idea is to welcome all your suggestions or all your comments so that the project can go as good as possible, and the next phases of the flagship can be even more productive and involve more and more of you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so for now, the really final word, I really would like to summon on the stage the real hero of these 2 days, which was sweating blood through the last few months to make this happen. This is Frank Wilhelm Mauch. Please join us, and please give him a huge round of applause. Okay, so we are improvising here. I have no idea what this is, but I suppose that Thomas just whispered to me that this should be a gift, a present for Frank. Is that right? Okay, fantastic. So we are really improvising. So here's a present for you.
Thank you.
Quantum noise reducer.
Turn it on.
Okay. Dear people, you want to give a very last statement, please.
This is even more improvised. So first of all, I realized we ordered slightly too little lunch today because we thought the event would be shorter and then forgot to update the order. I think this was clearly an event that is unique, so I learned a lot of things that I will not repeat. But in the end, I learned, and also we got this from our event manager, that even though it was complicated, even though we redefined on the path several times the goals and the agenda, everybody realized that this is a great community, so everybody moved along, collaborated, even with short deadlines, everybody was friendly. So thanks for making this a pleasant event to organize and a very constructive event in the end.
And see you in Grenoble. Thank you.